What whiskey is made in Kentucky comes in a square bottle with a white label. You may have been thinking Jim Beam, and you may or may not have been wrong. Hello Whisky fans, and that's Whisky with an E today because we are doing a bourbon review today. This is Lidl's Western Gold. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Lidl is a budget supermarket here in the UK and through a lot of Europe, and they produce this Western Gold white label, which is their, shall we say, budget, very cheap own brand of bourbon whiskey. It does taste like a bourbon, I can tell you that much. So let's get on with the nosing and tasting. So as always, let's begin with the nose. So I'm getting diluted corn syrup and sweet caramel notes. It's reasonably intense in the sweetness, but it's not overpowering as you get in some bourbons. Also a little planky wood, a little bit of some dry wood notes, and also some sweet nuttiness. It must be said though that this is a reasonably heavily vanillaed bourbon. Also getting a strange sweet effervescent note. It's a little bit like a budget cola, like not Coca-Cola, maybe a knockoff diet brand of cola that you might get very cheaply in a supermarket. Also getting some wood spice, but it's not it's not an overpowering wood spice, and it's actually quite pleasant. It's a certain peppery quality to the nose. Has to be said, there's a little ginger there, a little gingery wood spice, but mainly it's a peppery peppercorn spice. And I think lastly, just to let you know that you're drinking a bourbon, there is a certain buttery popcorn note to the nose as well. So it's not a bland or dull or underpowered nose, and it's definitely not a rough and immature nose either. It's very pleasant, it's reasonably complex, and it's much better than the price tag might indicate. So let's get on with the tasting. So I'm getting more of that diluted corn syrup and caramel notes. And again, lots of vanilla on the palate. Not overpowering, but it's strong vanilla. It's definitely there. And again, more popcorn notes on the palate, and that nuttiness from the nose. I think on the palate it's turning more into, with the caramel, it's turning into sort of a peanut brittle note, which is very nice. Something that I really like about the palate on this one. It actually has a very pleasant sourness to it. Just gives it that little bit more character, just another dimension. Really nice. As for the finish, I'm going to say medium to medium short. Slightly earthy, nutty, sweet, and as always you've got that vanilla note that follows this whiskey around. So as for a grade, I'm going to give this one a C+. Now, I don't really think that you should compare marks for bourbons to whiskies. I don't really think that's fair at all, but I definitely think that this bourbon is more than deserving of a grade towards the upper ends of what you would call good. Now, I am not a bourbon expert, I am primarily a Scotch drinker, but I think it's fairly safe to say that Lidl want you to look at this and think Jim Beam. And I'd actually say, I have tried quite a few bourbons, and to me this does actually taste like it could actually be Jim Beam. And more than that, I would wholly recommend this whiskey. It sells in the UK for around £12, so this is really much cheaper than anything else out there. Now, I would say that the American whiskey or bourbon that people tend to think of here in the UK when they talk about such things is Jack Daniel's. And when you consider that Western Gold is significantly cheaper than Jack Daniel's, even when Jack Daniel's is on offer, I would go with this one every time. If I had to come up with any criticisms for this bourbon, I would say that it is fairly heavily vanillaed, so if you don't like that in your bourbons, might be one to give a miss. And other than that, some people who might be used to the more premium, high-proof whiskies might say that this is a little bit tame. and I would see where they're coming from, but I don't really agree. This is going to be one of those very, very rare times when I'm actually not going to criticise a whisky for being bottled at 40%. I think despite the low proof, it is very full flavoured, and it's actually quite complex as well. And even though it's only 3 years old, it's very smooth and quite mature. So if you're after a bourbon for mixers or just a cheap bourbon for sipping, this is highly recommended.